So I'm going to start with, I'm Michael Staten from Learn Capital. I want to start with a kind of question to you all. Feel free to shout it out or raise your hand. What kind of food or cuisine can you get within like 5 miles of your house? Like, what's your favorite cuisine you can get within like 5 miles of your house? Indian. Just about whatever you want. Okay. Fruits? Fruits from the garden. Oh, DIY food, yeah. Thai food, right. So, 300, 200 years ago, this was like not the case at all. You were pretty much stuck with whatever you had locally. So what kind of schools can you get within 5 miles of your house? What kind of education can you get within 5 miles of your house? So what happened with food in the past 200 years, right? What changed? What happened, right? So the answer is that, it went from being a local, uniform, non-market to being a functioning global market with an explosion in a diversity of options, right? And let's see, uniformity, it turns out, is boring, and people want a diversity of options. We're all here today because our stories around education are breaking down. The stories that we tell ourselves. So I kind of grew up on this story that I feel like, I benefited greatly from, but many people also were telling themselves, which is, you go to primary school, which sends you to secondary school, and if you do well, you go to college, which then puts you into economically secure employment. And that story, it turns out, is breaking down. And so we're all in a kind of identity crisis about what story should we be telling ourselves about education. And the good news is that the story is in part breaking down because we've been so successful at bringing education to everyone in the past 200 years. It turns out it was a good story, so we wanted to implement it universally and uniformly for everyone. And we've actually done quite a good job, particularly in the Western and Northern world, of doing that. So we're pretty much at universal primary and secondary education. And if you look at the UN reports, we're rapidly approaching universal primary school everywhere around the world, though there are, of course, tough people to reach and insecure places. But this started less than 200 years ago in Prussia, right? And so we've made a huge amount of progress. And now suddenly the world has become educated enough to question that story, basically. We've become so educated now we're starting to demand more from our education, which is in part why the story is breaking down. So what's my own story? I started as a public school teacher in Houston, Texas, in like the most challenging school, challenged school in the district. I was a union-paying public school teacher for 3 years. And technically, though I'm not the same age as Joe, depending on which demographic study you're reading, I am the first year of the millennials. And I looked around as a teacher, and I said, wow, this task, to do a good job at this task is nearly impossible, right? And I was looking at the learners in front of me, that even on my best days, half of them were like rolling their eyes, wishing they were somewhere else. And I started to dream of technology tools that could make this whole process better, right? And I ended up getting recruited to join a startup out in Palo Alto. I didn't know what a startup was. I didn't know where Palo Alto was. I only knew Stanford as a place I would never get into. And kind of rapidly ended up starting my own company, and now I've been on the founding team of 4 different companies. Ones that you might know include Uncollege and Dev Bootcamp. And now I'm on the investor side, basically because it turns out I like being involved so much that I want to be involved in everything. And it's hard to do that when you're running a company. So I have another question here for you, which is, what happens to animals in feedlots? Does anybody know? Well, they do get killed. Luckily, we don't do that. The answer is the environment's very unhealthy, and it only works if you pump them full of antibiotics and all kinds of things that are really, really unhealthy for the animal. And it just turns out that uniformity is unhealthy. What happens in the natural world, right? What makes an ecosystem healthy and allows animals to thrive in that ecosystem? Diversity, right? The answer is biodiversity, right? And biodiversity didn't just start billions of years ago. What happened in biology is a historical process of mutation and adaptation, right? And a lot of the conversations that I'm in around education are basically trying to demand more from the system that we've set up to uniformly and universally replicate that story of education to college to employment, that story that's breaking down, right? And people are demanding more and more from the same system that was set up to do roughly the same thing. But that's not how innovation happens. That's not how adaptation happens. Adaptation happens when there is a mutation, right? And let's see. So innovations start at the margins and in the gaps. It happens with random acts of mutating ideas, people that get new ideas and then go off and try to start them. This is an act of entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is our society's version of mutation. That's how we end up with the X-Men and the Avengers. And innovation is our society's way of adapting. It's how we create a biodiversity of organizations. It's how we create a diversity of options. Innovation tends, one of the challenges right now is people want a new story. They had a universal story that was working for everyone, and now they want a new universal story that will work for everyone. But innovation is divergent, it's fractal, it is finding and serving the rich complexity of demand, right? The new complexity of demand that's enabled by everyone being educated. And one of the areas of demand that Lisa spoke about that we've heard a lot about is this idea of co-learning, of learning collectives, of learning centers that empower individual learning plans and learners. And it's clear that we need someone to mutate, right? We need someone to take this mutation and run with it. And at Learn Capital, we're definitely looking for someone who has that idea mutation and is willing to run with it. We need somebody to basically break from the feedlot of the education system that we have today and go on an adventure. And diversity and complexity will always beat uniformity. So I encourage anyone here that has the ability to be an entrepreneur to set off on an entrepreneurial endeavor. You may not start a billion-dollar company, but it's definitely an adventure worth pursuing. And for those of you who can't have the courage to operate on the margins, reject uniformity and find your own story and then tell it, as we need this diversity of stories in order to eventually converge on a new one.